Good morning all. Today we are going to discuss about distributed message passing. We know message passing is the basis of interprocess communication in a distributed system, and it is at the lowest level of abstraction, and we know it requires more application programs for identifying message data types, which data types are used, and sources of communications. And communications, we know that it is sending a information between a consists of sent and receive nodes. So in message model we have to study how to message send in between a client server model or one node to another model. We know in distributed system, the computer does not share main memory. Here it is interprocess communication technique that rely on a shared memory. So we cannot use semaphores in these techniques. Instead of this, we have used two approaches. Mainly, first one is the straightforward applications, which is mainly used at the single system, and second is the separate technique that rely on message passing as a basic function, that is the remote procedure RPC, or remote procedure call. It is an example of typical application structure for a banking sector. And this is we know service oriented architecture. Service oriented architecture is a design pattern which is designed to build a distributed system that delivers services to to other applications through a set of protocols. The main advantages of service oriented architecture is easy to integrate, manage complexity, and it is mainly platform independent. So have to use a service oriented architecture, and it have only less coupling. It is an example of service oriented architecture. Then in message oriented middleware, it show the first one show the message oriented middleware mechanism. It show the use of message passing to implement client server functionality. A client process require some services such as how to read a file, print, and can send a message containing a request for service to a server process. The server process honors that request and send a message containing a reply. The server which produce a reply message. In this only two functions are needed, that is send and receive. We know send means it specify the destination, from where to we have to send the data, and include message content, what are the contents of the message we have to pass. And receive, it tell from whom the message is desired, and provide a buffer when the incoming message is to be stored. That is two functions are contained in this mechanism, that is send and receive. Then this is the basic message passing primitives. In this system, it suggests the implementation for message passing, and process make use of services of a message passing. The module service request can be expressed in terms of primitives and parameters. Primitives means that it specify the function to be performed, and parameters which use it to pass the data, and it have access to control the information. The actual form of primitive mainly depend on the message passing software, and it may be a procedure called this primitive is mainly on procedure call, or it means if a message to a process which, when is the part of the OS. Send primitive is used by the process that desire to send the message. Its parameters can identify the destination, however to it send the data, and the content of the message. This message passing module constructed data unit that include these two elements, and this data is sent to machine which host the destination process, and using some sort of communication facility such as TCP/IP protocol. When the data is received in the target system, that is when the data is received in the destination system, it is routed by the communication facility to the message passing module. This message passing module examine the process ID field and store the message in the buffer for that process. The most fundamental of these choices are between blocking and non-blocking primitives, and the second one is reliable or non-reliable. Reliability versus non-reliability. That means a sender process waiting for response without knowing message is transmitted in a non-reliable process. That is reliable message passing facility which guarantee that delivery is possible, or that means it is success or not. Such a facility make use of transport protocol or some acknowledgement because delivery is guaranteed. It is not necessary to know the process to know the message was delivered or not. However, it might be useful to provide an acknowledgement to back to the if the data is sent successfully reached in the destination process, it provide an acknowledgement system. Then we can know that from this acknowledgement system the data is successfully transmitted. In either case, facility to achieve deliver persistent network failure or crash of destination system, which causes the failure of this message passing. Then blocking versus non-blocking. Blocking means will wait until a communication has been completed in its local process before it's continuing. That is in non-blocking. Non-blocking in the process is not suspended. Hence, when a process it is also known as asynchronous primitives. In this process is not suspended. Hence, when a process issues send a primitive, the operating system return its control to one process soon as the message has been built for transmitting or copy has been made. The main risk of this approach, if no copy is made, any change can made to this message by sending the process or before while at the transmitting time. The main advantage that is CPU is not idle, and the drawback of this system is in this sender does not know when the message buffer is cleared or not, and it is difficulty to test, debug, and then timing dependent sequences which create a subtle and difficult problems. These are the main drawbacks of this non-blocking. Then alternative is used to blocking. A blocking cannot send the return control to the sending process in which the message has been transmitted or it has been sent an acknowledgement. Then RPC means it is a remote procedure call. It is a protocol that one program can to use request a service from one program located in another computer on a network without having to understand the network details. It is also known as a function call or subroutine call. RP uses the client server model, and a client is requesting from the server. It returns the result. That means server is replaying until the replaying or giving the result. The server is replaying, the client has to wait until the whenever the server is replaying until the time the client has to wait. The remote procedure call mainly consists of 5 elements, that is client stub, runtime, server, and server stub. The main advantages of RPC is it is a remote it's support oriented and thread oriented modules, and many of the protocol layers are omitted by RPC to improve its performance, and its effort to rewrite and redevelop the code is minimum in remote procedure code. And main disadvantages of this RPC, that means there is no flexibility in RPC hardware architecture, and it is only based on the interaction, and there is an increase in cost because of remote procedure code, and expenses is very high. There is no standardized method for the remote procedure calls. This is the general architecture of these remote procedure calls, which have client and server. The main client means it user the process just initiate the remote procedure call. That means the client makes perfect normal call that invokes a corresponding procedure in the client stub. That is in client stub, that means a piece of code which is used to convert the parameters parameters. On receipt of a request, it packs a requirement into a message and asks for RPC runtime to send. On receipt of a result time, it unpacks the result and passes to the client. The main functions of this client step are packing and unpacking. RPC runtime means it handles the transmission of message between the client and server. And in server node, it have server step and server. We know server, it execute the appropriate procedure and return the result from the server step. And server step means it unpack the call request and make a perfectly normal call to invoke the appropriate procedure from the server. And the general form of calling programs make a normal procedure call with the parameters on which machines are. For example, the call P of xy, where P means procedure name and x is the passed arguments and y is the return values from the server. The main intention is to invoke a remote procedure call on others' machines, and dummy or a stub procedure P is included in the caller's address space. This procedure creates a message. We have to identify the procedures being called and include the parameters. It then sends this message to a remote system, and we have to wait for this reply. When the reply message is resulted, the step procedure returned to the calling program providing the result. At this time, the remote machine, another step program is associated with its the called procedure. When the message come and the local call P of xy is generated, this means this remote procedure is called local P of xy, and its normal assumption is about to find the parameters and to find the stack of the stack. These are the main assumptions of the local call. Then parameter passing means the for parameter passing, call by value and call by reference are generally used. Call by value means the client subcopy and packages a value from the client into a message so that it can be sent to the server through a network. It is the most programming languages allow parameters to pass the value as a call by value or as a pointer. That means call by reference, it means pointer to a location. Call by value is a simple approach method for a remote procedure call, so hence we use call by value generally. In this call by reference, it is more difficult to implement because the pointer is needed for each object and the effort is very high. And parameter represent, another issue is how to represent the parameter and result in a message. If the called program and calling program are identical programming language, both of them are same type of machine is used in the same, and hence they are used in the same operating system, then the representation requirement have no problems in this case. But if there is a difference in these areas, then there will be probably a difference in way in which the number can or even text are represented. If a bullhorn communication, full-blown communication architecture is used, then this issue is handled by the presentation layer of the OSI model. Then client-server binding. We know binding means how the relationship between the remote procedure call and the calling program is existed. A binding is formed only when two applications have made a logical communication and are prepared to their exchange communication. That means binding. And there are two types of bindings are existed: non-persistent binding and persistent binding. In non-persistent binding means the logical connection is established between the process at the time of the remote procedure call, and it is soon as the values are returned and the connection is mismatched. Because a connection requires the maintenance of a state information on both ends, it is used to conserve these resources. And in persistent binding, in this connection is set up for a remote procedure call is sustained and after the procedure return, and this connection can then be used for future remote procedure call. The connection within the specific time of period when no activity is held on the connection is terminated. And this persistent binding help us to use the same connection for future process. Then synchronous versus asynchronous. Synchronous remote procedure call means which is similar to blocking and non-blocking message. That means it is an analog of blocking and non-blocking message. Traditional remote procedure call is synchronous because it requires the calling process has to wait until the process returns a value. Synchronous RPC behaves like a subroutine call, and it helps to the main advantage is it is easy to understand, and program behavior is predictable, that we have to predict the characteristics. And but the main disadvantage, it has to fail to explain fully the parallelism, that means which are inherent to the distributed applications. For this we have to use another model, that is asynchronous remote procedure call. Asynchronous remote procedure call does not block the caller. That means it is one of the flexible model asynchronous RPC. The relay can be message can be received as when they are needed, thus allowing client execution to proceed locally in a parallel within the server invocation. Asynchronous RPC is enable the client to invoke a server repeatedly so that a client has a number of requests in the pipeline at one time, and the synchronization of client server can be achieved mainly in two ways. The first one is a high layer application in the server, in the client, and server can initiate the exchange and check at the time which is that all requested action have been performed. And second method is a client can issue a string of asynchronous RPC, that means followed by a synchronous RPC. This server will respond to the synchronous RPC only after completing all the work that you requested in the preceding asynchronous RPC. In some schemes, asynchronous RPC require no reply from the server, and the server cannot send a reply message. Other schemes that means existed that require allow a reply, but the caller does not wait for this reply. Then in this, the last one is object oriented mechanism. In this approach, the client and server ship message back forth are exist between the communications, and the in object communications may rely on underlying message, or that means it may be structured or developed directly on the top of the object oriented capabilities in the operating system. And a client that need a service that you have to send a request to an object request broker, and which act as a directory to all the remote services which is existed on that available network. Then the success of this object oriented approach that depend upon the standardization of the object mechanism. There are several methods. That is, one is Microsoft Component Object Model, that is COM, that is basis of the linking embedding, object linking embedding. That COM is based on the OLI is based on the COM, that is component object model. And there is another one, a combating approach developed by the object management group is the common object request broker architecture, that is CORBA, which is mainly used by the industry support, that is IBM, Apple, Sun, and many other venture support this CORBA approach. Thank you.